Welcome to Mixed and Mastered. Today, we have an Oscar-winning filmmaker, Joseph Patel. He and Questlove won an Oscar for Summer of Soul, and they dropped their new film, Sly Lives, on Hulu. He is now working on an upcoming documentary about the hip-hop legend, Jay Dilla. From music journalist to filmmaker, Joseph's career has been nothing short of amazing. This is Mixed and Mastered with Joseph Patel. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. Mixed and Mastered with my man, Joseph Patel. How you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. Good to see you.
You too, man. It's been quite a long time. You know, we kind of stay in touch via social media, but we haven't seen each other, you know?
I mean, I feel like that's a lot of your life right now.
I think it's a lot of all of our lives right now. And hey, so quick, do you want me to call you Jazzy Bo or Joseph Patel? Joseph, what do you want?
Joseph is fine.
All right. I think that's what I've always called you anyway, actually.
Yeah.
So you were born in the Bay Area, Fresno?
No, I was born in Pennsylvania, but I grew up in the Bay Area.
You grew up in the Bay?
Yeah, a town called Fremont.
Fremont, excuse me. Fremont. Now, how far is that from Oakland?
Like 15 minutes.
Oh, so you're right there in the mix.
Yeah, it's like, it goes like Oakland, Hayward, Fremont.
Yeah, I've been to Hayward. I've never been to Fremont. I took there's a street in Oakland that takes you all through all of that. Oh God, I'm blown.
International.
Is it International? It just takes you straight down through every town.
International and Mission.
Maybe I think it was International
because I think Mission. And then 14th does that too. But yeah.
So tell me about growing up in the Bay.
Oh man, so I landed in the Bay when I was like 5, and Fremont is this like suburban town. It was very immigrant heavy, or starting to get very immigrant heavy when my family moved there.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about the Bay is that it's very diverse. So like my school experiences are being in a classroom with Black, white, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Filipino, big Filipino population.
Mm-hmm.
All the best looking girls in high school were Filipino. And, at the same time, the parts of the Bay are also very segregated too. But 9 times out of 10, you're in a situation where you're just with other people of color. It was interesting, boring, suburban childhood. But a couple of things like really, music was the thing that was my sort of gateway out of there.
So let me tell you one quick thing. When I spent a lot of time in Oakland years ago, but there was a time when I was out there a lot, and I always stayed in San Francisco, and it was always get on my back like, "Why are you staying in the city? Why you don't stay in Oakland?" I'm like, I don't want to stay in the city. But anyway, the one thing I noticed about Oakland, I wonder if I'm saying to say, I wonder if Fremont was the same way. If you met somebody from Oakland, like you said, whatever, it didn't matter, white, black, but they always said, "I'm from Oakland." Oakland was like the first. They didn't say I'm like black from Oakland or I'm green or I'm Filipino from. It was like Oakland was the common denominator for everybody.
Or even more specific, West Oakland or East Oakland, right? Like everyone I ever met from Oakland specified, I'm from West Oakland, I'm from East Oakland. Fremont wasn't that. Fremont's not as cool as Oakland. Fremont, when you're from Fremont, you say you're from the Bay.
Yeah, from the Bay.
You're not really trying to say you're from Fremont. But what's funny is music for me was like the way I was able to learn about the world, right? So I was like a goth skate kid in high school where, I liked Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and The Cure and New Order as much as I liked Public Enemy and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And, it was like, it just was a weird mix like that. And a lot of that was from, there's 2 people in my life that I met where it just like opened me up to a different world. Too Short was real big. Like we used to play street football and street baseball in the little cul-de-sac I grew up in, listening to Too Short and Run DMC and like,
Okay.
So it was just like music everywhere. And that was sort of like the thing that saved me, I think, from like a boring suburban life.
Real quick before we move to the next thing, give me your Bay Area Mount Rushmore. Since everybody, Mount Rushmore is kind of a big thing now, give me a Bay Area Mount Rushmore.
I'm not playing the Mount Rushmore game.
Okay. I respect it.
I'll give you like top. I mean, it's funny because it's different now than it was then for me, right? Like,
Definitely.
I mean, Short is definitely on there. Sly Stone, right? We have the new documentary by Sly. He's in the top 5. Let's see who else. You'd have to say Santana, although I gotta admit I've never been a huge Santana fan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. That's a tough question.
All right, well, I'll leave it.
All right. Yeah. Lil B's got to be on there. E40.
40. Yeah.
DJ Shadow. I put DJ Shadow on there.
Yeah. I mean, there's Keisha Cole. There's Raphael Sadiq. There's
Raphael's probably top 5, right?
Yeah. The Bay has a lot of the Bay has put out a lot of talent. So you went to Cal Davis?
UC Davis, yeah.
Davis. Tell me about that. And I know that's where you kind of tapped into the college radio thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny after the Oscars a couple years ago, I got an email from the chancellor of UC Davis.
Really?
Gary May. And he was like, Chancellor would like to invite you to be the first guest for the upcoming school year's Chancellor Conversations.
Wow.
And I did not really love my academic experience at UC Davis. I was a econ major with an English minor. And, I don't remember learning anything. Like, honestly, like I learned more about life than I did about like academics, right?
Yes.
But, I really started getting into college radio when I was in high school because living in Fremont, we had KZSU in Stanford you could get, and KFJC in the Los Altos Hills, and KSJC in San Jose, and CalX in Berkeley.
CalX, I remember them.
Yeah, all those stations, depending on which part of the Bay you were in, you could get. And so I was really listening to college radio a lot. So when I got to Davis, first thing I did, I started listening to college radio, and I heard 2 shows. One was from Jeff Chang, DJ Zen, and the other was from a woman, I forget her real name, but her radio name was Voodoo Child.
I don't remember her.
And those 2 shows just rocked my world. Like, they were just incredible. A lot of hip hop, but a lot of like Voodoo Child used to play a lot of like, I was really into like Funkadelic and stuff like that. Okay. So she used to play a lot of that. And so I went down to the station one day when Jeff had his show, and I got to meet him. He ends up becoming my mentor. Like, he just was like, takes me in, right? And we would come by the radio station. Now, who else was at the radio station was DJ Shadow, who lived in Davis, Josh Davis. And then Chief Excel and Lyrics Born, Chief Excel from Blackalicious, Lyrics Born, Tom Shimura at the time, he was called Asia Born.
Okay.
And we were just like at the radio station all the time. And I was not a rapper. I was not a DJ. I was writing for magazines at the time.
Okay.
And really just my friends' zines. Jeff was writing for magazines, real magazines. And I told him I wanted to do what he did. And so he sort of like showed me the ropes. And, there was some hip hop magazines being born around that time, early 90s, right? Like the Bomb Hip Hop magazine, Flavor out of Seattle. So I started writing. I started hanging out with Jeff at his radio show and got to meet all these other people. But Jeff, he's just such a generous spirit. So like he's not a gatekeeper. Jeff Chang is not a gatekeeper. He's like, oh, you want to do this? Here, let me show you how this works.
Yeah, he's very free with the information.
Yeah. So sorry, I got to turn my phone down.
All right.
So yeah, I just started hanging out at the station, and I ended up getting a show. And there were not a lot of hip hop shows on college radio at the time. And so it was Jeff, and then I started doing one. Chief Excel started doing one, and I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, that's when I was doing promotion. I would come to the Bay a lot because I worked at Job, and we had a lot of acts out there. But also, it was a big, like I said, college radio scene out there, and then the Gavin convention and all that stuff. So it was a great chance to go out there and meet people and go around and see how it worked. It's obviously much different now, but that was a good scene. And going to Leopold's and. You know what I'm saying? And all that stuff, man. Yeah, that was some good times.
So I would say the crew that I ended up meeting, we ended up forming a rap crew, a hip hop crew.
Okay.
Soul Sides.
Okay.
That was DJ Shadow, Blackalicious, Lyrics Born. We had a guy named Benj that was down with the crew, but he unfortunately passed away a few years later. Gab moved up from Pacoima to join Chief Excel. That was Blackalicious.
Mm-hmm.
A year after we started Soul Sides, Latif, the truth speaker, came and was part of UC Davis, so he joined our crew. And we would congregate around my radio show, and they would freestyle, and we started pressing. Jeff Shadow was doing mixes for Funkin' Klein at the time.
Yeah,
Hollywood Basic.
Dave, yeah.
And I was writing for the Bomb Hip Hop magazine, and we were going to the Gavin convention, and it was like really starting to like feel like I was a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
Also, want to shout out Benny B.
Yes, that's my. I've told that guy forever, but man, that was my guy. I miss that guy so much.
Yeah, you should reach out to him.
I will.
I haven't talked to him in years, but
yeah,
Benny was instrumental in creating this thing called the Bay Area Hip Hop Coalition.
Yep.
And what he did was he took all the radio, like I said, every college radio station had at least one hip hop show. I'm sorry, I'm like I've been talking all day. My voice is going.
It's all right.
And Benny, he's like, we should all form basically a coalition where we all report the same records and we chart individually, but we chart the same records. And what he was trying to do is basically leverage all the disparate stations around the Bay Area into one voting block. Mm-hmm. So what it did was it meant you have to bring your artists to the Bay. You have to give drops to all the stations. You have to fuck with us, basically. Mm-hmm. And for someone who had a new show on the radio and, was getting drops from De La Soul and Tribe and Leaders in the New School, mm-hmm. and like all my favorite groups, it was incredible, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And then during Gavin Convention, Bay Area Hip Hop Coalition would throw shows.
Yes.
And, I remember one show we did at the Longshoremen's Hall, and it was like Pete Rock and CL Smooth and Main Source and Naughty by Nature. And, it was just incredible. And so, my experience at college was really, really about like the radio station and starting this label and writing for magazines and being a part of something bigger. And it was through music and through hip hop specifically that I felt like I belonged to something.
So that's when you got immersed into the hip hop culture fully.
Yeah. And it was, it was, I don't, how do I describe it? It was like, you come to UC Davis as a freshman, you don't know anybody, and then a year later you're part of a crew. Like it just felt good. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So, and really the writing took off because Jeff was encouraging me to write. Dave Paul let me write for the Bomb Hip Hop magazine. I did a couple of interviews and I was like, I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
This is it.
I get to interview my favorite artists and talk about the creative process. Now, the early years was me really pretending to be something I wasn't, right? I was writing funny. I was like adopting an accent, like, a hip hop accent. And it just like within like the first time I saw, I think it was my first piece I saw, and I was just like, oh, this isn't me. It was really, really, really evident to me. I felt embarrassed and I was like, okay, I can do this, still be engaged and not have to be inauthentic.
Yeah, you found your voice.
And started to find my voice, but realized it had to start from a place where I wasn't pretending to be like a hip hop kid. You know what I mean?
I got you.
And so it was cool. And the hustle I had was I was writing for magazines, and because of Jeff's encouragement, I was writing for bigger and bigger magazines and more magazines. Because I was writing for magazines, I get advances of albums 3 months in advance. And it was and I would play it on my radio show. Whereas radio got their advances maybe a couple weeks before. They'd get the single early, but they wouldn't get the album early.
Okay.
And so I was like, I wrote the bio for Midnight Marauders. So I got the advance like at the beginning of summer.
Wow.
And I listened to that album all summer during my internship. I had a 1 hour commute each way. And I did a couple radio shows that summer at Davis, and I played like album cuts that no one had ever heard yet. And it was like, and it's like, I was like, no one in New York is going to hear this stuff. So my listeners, and I had a little, cool little loyal following on the air, but like they got some treats.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those days of getting records early, and I had a couple. I'll leave them unnamed because I don't know if the statute of limitations went out. I had a couple plugs at the source, and I would get stuff early. I remember, and I lost all that stuff in, but I had the Chronic early.
Oh yeah, wow.
I remember going to the barbershop in Harlem and listening to the Chronic on my headphones and letting people skip me. Like, no, you go ahead, because I was so enraptured by the album. I kept listening to it over and over. I let 3 or 4 people like skip the line and jump in front of me because I was locked in. You know, those were good times.
Yeah, man. So, I had Illmatic early.
Wow.
I had a dub of Illmatic from, what was the publicist's name at Sony at the time? I think his name was Miguel.
Yep.
Yeah, Miguel gave me an advance of Illmatic. I forget who I reviewed it for, or I interviewed Nas for somebody. And I remember we made a trip to LA in 94, early 94, and listened to that. That's the only record we listened to on a 7-hour drive.
Over and over again.
It was incredible. Because, you know, at the time, everyone was like, Illmatic. You know, it was such a highly anticipated album, and it delivered, really.
Yeah, no, it definitely did.
It's an album that met the hype, and I remember we listened to that. Must have listened to it like 10 times on the drive down. Like,
I had Faith on the show last week, so I'll let her know.
That's cool.
So tell me about the move from the Bay to New York.
So after I got out of college, as a child of immigrant parents, they could not wrap their head around the idea that I was going to be working at a record label where I wasn't making any money.
Yeah, they're gonna be, you're poor, you're gonna be in the streets.
Yeah, so, and like, really, they just didn't have the way to grasp that. And honestly, they were right? They were correct. And, you know, I got left Soul Sides, really got kicked out because I was just really torn between like my obligations there and my obligations to my career as, you know, my parents' idea of a career. Mm-hmm. And I just dropped the ball on a bunch of stuff. And they were just like, listen, it can't be like this. And so you have to choose. And I was like, I can't stay at this label. Like, I can't do it. And so I took a job in Silicon Valley. I worked for Elon Musk, actually.
Really?
For a year.
Did you meet him back then?
Yeah, we used to have weekly meetings with him. He had a company called Zip.
Wow. Wait. How was he back then?
Oh, like a mute. Like, really? It was like, I mean, it was his. So I worked, more specifically, I worked for a PR company that had their only client was this company called Zip2, and specifically we repped Kimball and Elon Musk. Kimball is his brother, who is the CEO, and Elon was the genius tech child CTO of the company. And Zip2 did maps, like Google Maps, but before Google Maps. And he would not speak in the room. He was weird, but didn't speak really. He was like, he wasn't the face of the company. And it just was like, it's a funny little trivial footnote in my story. But I had this job at this Silicon Valley PR company, and it was awful. I hated it. And I was writing for magazines, and like, you know, by that time I was writing for, I think, The Source and XXL wasn't born yet. It was like The Source and Vibe and Rap Pages and Herb Magazine, as well as like the regional zines Flavor and Bomb and One Nut, and like I was writing for Straight No Chaser in the UK, and like, you know, it was like incredible to like get records for free, write about music, and see it, my name in print, right?
Yeah.
But there's no money in that, and so eventually, a few years later, I ended up one of the writers, one of my editors at Raygun Magazine, left to went to work for an internet startup. Right, this is the first .com bubble.
Okay,
99. Company was called CD Now, and he says, "I want you to be my hip hop editor at CD Now. We're based in New York. I'm going to pay you something like $75,000 a year, and you're moving." Which is great back then. And you're moving expenses. And I was like, okay, I'm moving to New York. And, you know, the thing is by that time I was flying to New York quite often for stories, right? My first time in New York as an adult is 90. I think this might have been when we first met. Okay. I got flown out to interview Tribe off the Beats, Rhymes, and Life record.
Okay.
I'd never been to New York before as an adult. I'm terrified because I'm just like, I don't know how to navigate this city. Mm-hmm. Theola Borden, I got put up at the Radisson Empire Hotel.
Wow.
Theola Borden was like, I'll show you around town. I'm like, cool. I've never ridden the subway before. I don't know how to ride the subway. She's like, I'll come get you.
Wow.
So she comes, gets me up at like 72nd and Broadway.
Yep.
And then shows me how to use the train. We go to the West Village. It's like August. And we just walk around. And it's hundreds of people on the street. And it was like, I think we must have spent like $10 like on food and beverages and just walked around for 4 hours. I thought it was the greatest city in the world. And I remember Tribe came to my hotel because Theola's like, I'm not sending you anywhere. I'm just going to have them come to your hotel.
Come to you.
And they came to the front desk and asked for me. And the people who worked at the hotel were bugging out that Q-Tip was asking for me. And we sat in the park across from the hotel.
Yep, the park, yep.
And just I did my interview there with Ali Shaheed and Tip.
Wow.
I still have the tape. I still have the transcripts. I just dug it out because, we're working on this Jay Dilla documentary, and that's the first interview where Tip mentions Dilla to me.
Yeah, because he worked on the Beats on His Life.
Yeah, he mentioned the Ummah.
Yeah.
And I was asking him about what is the Ummah, and I was under the impression that Ali Shaheed did beats. No one really clarified differently, so it was pretty funny. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. So, how did you get? Well, tell me how you got to MTV from that.
So I was first .com bubble. I'm working at CD Now. Then Russell launched his 360hiphop.com.
I remember that.
It was called RS1W initially. And Selwyn Hines and Sheena Lester, who were previous editors of mine at The Source and Rap Pages, recruited me to work with them over there as the hip hop editor, as the culture editor. And it was like a murderer's row of journalists, right? It was like Sheena Lester, Selwyn Hines, Chris X, Andrea Duncan Mao, myself, Serena Kim, John Caramonica, Jeff Chang, Dave Tompkins.
Wow, all in one spot.
Ola Kudu, like all in one spot. And it was like, and I did that through 2000, and then the bubble burst. And then I went back to freelancing. And then by 2003, freelancing after 9/11, like freelancing budgets went south.
Yeah.
And, what I used to get paid like $1 or $2 a word for a pretty mid-sized magazine was now paying like 50 cents a word.
Wow.
And that's not enough to pay rent in New York. So I took a job at MTV as a freelancer for a 2-week stint. I think I was filling in Minya O's old job. She was a producer there. I came in as a writer. 2-week stint turned into a 2-month stint, turned into a permalance job. I was pretty humble because I had gone into debt like while I was freelancing, and I hadn't worked at any place. And so I came into MTV promising myself I would not try to be the smartest person in the room. I would not try to pretend that I had the better taste than everyone that worked there. I would just submit myself to the job until I figured out how it worked, and then figure out it was just a different strategy, right?
Yeah.
And so for 6 months I worked at MTV as a writer. I did everything they asked me to do. Like Diddy's releasing a perfume or cologne at Macy's, you got to cover the red carpet and interview teenagers. I'm like, cool. Right? Like, Britney Spears is, doing some publicity stunt in Times Square. Go cover it. I'm like, cool. And, I basically did it because I was like, I need a job. I need
bread. Yeah, you need the bread. Shit.
I needed bread, but also I needed a career path. I needed someplace where I could grow.
Yeah.
And have something to aim for, to reach for and get it, and then keep doing that. Because freelancing, I realized there's no mentors. There's nothing, there's no obstacles in front of you. How many relationships that I ruined with significant others because, when you freelance, like, it doesn't matter if it's a weekend or not, right? It's like,
doesn't matter what time it is.
Doesn't matter what time it is. And so, I was like looking for a shot. I'm glad I did it. I think 6 months in, I realized that I didn't love writing, but I loved storytelling. And I was working as a writer at MTV News. I was working a lot with producers there.
Okay.
And so 6 months in, I'm like, wait a minute. I pitch the story, do the interviews, I write the script, but someone else is shooting it and their name is on the piece.
When it was really your work.
And I'm like, okay. So I said, what's the difference? Like, what producing is you're directing the cameras and you're shooting sometimes. And I'm like, well, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sorry, I got noisy neighbors. Can you hear that?
Oh yeah. I hear.
Yeah, hold
I
on.
thought it was thunder. Actually, I thought it
No,
was
let's give
thunder
it
outside.
1 second. I don't like my neighbors.
New York living.
So I pitched this story on the Roots. They were recording their new album in Philly, and this is the piece that I did, where I pitched the story. I interviewed everybody in the group. We shot a bunch of stuff. I did the script. I went into the edit, and someone else's name was on it. And I was like, "This isn't right. I want to produce."
Yeah.
And my boss actually, he's like, "Well, writers don't become producers," and I said, "Well, why not?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know actually why not." He's like, and my boss at the time, Ocean McAdams, he changed my life. He gave me a shot to produce. He's like, "All right, produce. Find a senior producer who can be your training wheels." Mm-hmm. He's like, "But I guess, if you know how to structure a story," his thinking was, if I knew how to structure a story, it would be easier to teach me how to use a camera than it is someone who knows how to use a camera, how to write a story.
Write a story, exactly.
And I just was like, he was right.
Yeah.
I was able to my first piece was on a Brooklyn marching band, high school marching band called the Brooklyn Steppers.
Wow.
And it was about the band leader, the teacher. He had this band doing hip hop cover songs, which they loved. They loved doing Jay-Z and Biggie songs. And in order to remain in the band, which the kids loved, you had to do your homework and have a certain GPA. But basically what they did was they took these kids in as soon as the final bell rang. They did 3 hours of homework, mentorship, tutoring, and then band practice for 2 hours. And it was turning out kids graduating with good grades, and they got to play in the band.
And they got to stay out of the street. Exactly.
And so that was my first piece, and everyone loved it, and it did well. And they're like, "Okay, we'll do another one." And it was just like it went from there.
So tell me let me just mention, for those who might not know, that era of working at MTV that you worked in was so dynamic, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Was so much happening. You had the hip hop was blowing up, like really blowing up, becoming pop, actually kind of crossing over. And then you had the pop acts too, like I said, like Britney and NSYNC and blah, blah, blah. And they were selling 10, 15 million albums, and MTV Awards were huge. And like MTV was literally they were the epicenter of pop culture, like for real. Like even bands from England, like Oasis and them, like you had to do MTV America to really crack it. You had to crack it.
And MTV News, we had Kurt Loder, Sujin Pak, Gideon Diego, John Norris, Sway Calloway, who I produced for many years, Shaheem Reed, the 1515 Boys, Ramon Dukes, later Jason Rodriguez. Like it was a really fun place to be. And News sort of stayed out of the mix of most of that stuff. We mostly operated independently, but you'd go out for lunch in Times Square, you'd come back and you'd go up to the 29th floor and you'd be in the elevator with like Gwyneth Paltrow and Snoop Dogg. And you'd hop in the elevator and it's like, there's Mos Def and there's, Justin Timberlake. And it's just like
Jay-Z or whatever. Yeah.
It's just like weird stuff like that. And it was just such a surreal place to be. But I really loved it because MTV became my grad school. 6 months after I produced my first piece, I did 5 pieces on Houston hip hop for hip hop.
I want to get to that.
And it became my block.
Yes.
So 6 months after I do my first piece, I'm directing my first show.
So tell us, I know what My Block was. It was actually one of my favorite shows ever.
Thank you.
I guess they don't even have them. You can't even look at them no more, right? They're not even on TV. But tell us what My Block was and how it developed.
So I think My Block was a half-hour documentary show on hip hop and it focused on, each episode was on one city or one region, which had never been done before that point. And part of that is because my love of like underground hip hop, I knew that there were scenes in all these little cities, but Houston was about to blow up, right? I had all these like mixtapes. I was a DJ Screw fan, a Swisher House fan. I heard this song Still Tippin', didn't think anything of it because this is when Chameleonaire was still on it. And then I hear this new version with Paul Wall on it, and I'm like, oh, this song is popping, right? It was like on all the mixtapes coming out of Houston at the time. And then I went home to visit my folks in the Bay, and I heard 2 people bumping it. And I was like, wait a minute, if it's being played here, it's about to be like big. I think KML was playing it. I was like, okay. So I pitched this Houston story. Mike Jones was big. And then it just like, we did these series of stories. We did Mike Jones, Paul Wall, Chameleonaire, Slim Thug. We did a whole thing on slabs. And I realized, like, even right off that first episode, it was like, it's not just about the music, it's about the city and the culture that gives birth to the music. And when you watch multiple episodes, our second episode was Memphis, and we got to go around with 3-6 Mafia.
3-6, yeah.
And it's a dream for me because I'm directing, which I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm directing for television stories about hip hop, underground hip hop that is now starting to become big, right?
Yeah.
And with each subsequent episode, I'm like feeling more confident. By the time we hit Atlanta in 2000, I think it was 2006, I'm like, let's do a great day in Atlanta. Let's get every Atlanta hip hop artist on a stoop and let's shoot a photograph. And it happened.
Yeah.
And it was like, shout out Whitney Gilbenta, who, put in just insane amounts of work to make that happen. But it's like, I had this idea that let's recreate this photo, and 100 artists from Atlanta show up on a chilly December morning to like do this photo. And so I love that experience of my block. Like, it, to this day, it is, people still remember that show. Like, old heads remember that show. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, working at a label where most of our artists weren't from New York, even though the label's New York based, I got the fortunate chance to go to obviously all these cities. Like I said, I went to the Bay, I went to Houston because of UGK, I was in New Orleans with Mystical, I was in Chicago with our bottom line. So I was seeing all these different pockets of culture. And so when you guys put it on TV, it was like, oh, yeah. That's how they do it in Houston, or that's how the cars look in the Bay, or that's how, it was almost like confirmation for me. It's like, I told y'all.
Yeah.
It's very different when you leave New York, how hip hop is, growing. It's not all New York based. Everybody's just not enamored over, what's happening here. There's these pockets of different culture. And when you guys put it on TV, I was very, very excited about that.
It was cool because for a lot of people, the real hip hop culture wasn't shown that way, right? And to some extent, we got to, when you shoot, my neighbors are cleaning their apartment right now, man. I'm really sorry.
And we'll be right back. Ready to launch your podcast? Merrick Studios offers comprehensive services, from concept development and seamless production to strategic marketing and monetization. Let your story take the mic. Visit merrickcreative.com/studios and let's get to work.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Ink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulumink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to our show.
But what was interesting is like the artists that we featured were so proud to show off their city.
Yeah.
And we weren't afraid to go anywhere. Like we were like, take us to your hood.
Yeah.
Like where you're from, your actual block.
Yeah.
And I think because we treated them with respect and allowed them to be the voice, as opposed to like what Vice did years later, where it felt like a bunch of dudes on safari.
Terrible.
Like it was like we allowed the artists, and Sway is the perfect host for stuff like this,
Absolutely.
right? Where we allow the artists to really tell us where they're from, to show us where they're from, and really focus on the cultural aspects, not the glorified aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience, I think, I didn't know what I was doing as a director or making television. I learned as I went, because I really basically got thrown into the deep end of the pool. And it's like, all right, you're directing a 2-camera shoot with a host, and you're trying to get all these stories. I think in my first show, Houston, we shot 40 hours of footage for what ultimately would be a 21-minute television show.
Wow.
With commercials, right? And it's like, I was like, wait, maybe I don't have to shoot that much. Maybe if I actually prepare a little bit better, I don't have to shoot that
safe
much.
than sorry, right?
Because then you're just in the edit for like months and you're like, what are we?
Yeah.
But the problem is that when we got to Chicago, and I wasn't prepared for this. When we got to Chicago, people knew we were in town. And so when I checked into my hotel, there was this guy waiting for me in the lobby.
Okay.
With his tape, and he was part of a street gang rap group crew something. And I, politely took his tape. He was looking for Joseph Patel, and I said, "Oh, he's not here yet." I'm like, "But I'll take this and I'll give it to him."
Yeah, I got you.
And then he left, and then I didn't do anything with it because I knew we only had 21 minutes. We had to like focus on what we were going to shoot, and we ended up getting held up a week later by the same dudes.
Wow!
They crashed one of our shoots in Hyde Park to a sneaker shop. Someone must have told them we were going to be there. They showed up. This dude walks through the frame. I'm interviewing Do or Die. This guy walks through the frame, and flashes his gun at me. And then two other dudes come and they take the cameras. And I'm like, and Whitney, God bless her, Whitney is there, and she's like, she dresses him down like she's somebody's mother, right? Like she's like, didn't your mothers teach you better? What are you doing? Like, but they were like, we just want him, and they're pointing at me. They want to take me somewhere, and I was like, listen, they're like, you can have the cameras back, but we want to take him somewhere. I'm like, take the cameras. Like, I don't care.
Wow,
they're not my cameras. And then through the conversation, and really this is Whitney's doing, she's like, let's just figure out what they want. Like, so she asked them. It turns out all they wanted to be was in the show. So I'm like, okay. So I say, listen, we're going to shoot this throw to commercial featuring you guys. I said, that's all I can do. There's no room in the show for anything else. I said, but we'll do this thing. It'll be quick. You guys all line up here. Sway's going to go down the line. He's going to introduce you guys. He's going to dap you all up, and we're going to shoot it. And it's got to be under 30 seconds. And they're like, fine. So we shoot it. I'm never going to use it. But I realized this is all they wanted, was just to be shot.
Yo, that's funny, because I was going to ask you, tell me a crazy My Block story, but you beat me to the point.
Yeah, this is it. So what happens is they give us back the cameras. I tell my crew, and my crew is funny, right? It's me, it's Sway, it's Whitney, it's Shaheem. It's our two camera guys who are like punk rockers. One of whom is like painfully good looking. The other one has a blue mohawk. It's a funny ass crew. So I tell the crew, I said, we're gonna shoot this. That's all they want. So let's just do it, and let's treat it with respect. Let's just do it for real. I did 3 takes. No, you can't do it like that. You gotta do it like this, and made sure I was like, but they knew I was invested, right?
Yeah.
That's all they wanted. We did 3 takes, and then they left. And it was like, but Chicago was crazy because sometimes when we would meet an artist at a corner in their hood, and sometimes we would show up early. You can't wait in your car in Chicago. And Sway is usually the buffer. He's like the guy that'll be like, no, Sway, and everyone's like, oh, Sway, what up?
Yeah.
They didn't give a shit. They were like, keep it moving. And Sway's like, no, fam, like, we're gonna be, and he's like, they're like, don't care, keep it moving. And we're like, okay. So we're like driving around, and and the other crazy one was Memphis. Juicy J, same thing. He's like, we don't stay anywhere for more than 10 minutes. He's like, and he says this in the back of his Bentley. He says, a sitting duck always gets plucked. And so I'm like, cool. This is my second episode ever, right? I'm like, all right, fine. Don't know what he's talking about. We have Juicy J and Paul take us to their first house they lived in together when they formed 3-6 Mafia. And they said, he's like, we're not going to be sitting ducks. We're there for 10 minutes. And then a couple of people come by and they're like, oh, Juicy, Paul, what up? 10 more minutes. It's like 20 people. I'm like, oh, we got to get out of here. And he's like, yeah. By the time we leave, we've only been there 30 minutes. There's 150 people at the house, all trying to be on camera.
What?
Juicy looks at me. He's like, I told you. I'm like, okay. And so like we all rush into the cars trying to leave. Everyone wants us to shoot them freestyling.
What?
And it's just like, yeah, it was pretty funny.
Wow. So tell me about, what did you do after, when you left MTV? What did you do?
I left MTV after the inauguration line.
Okay.
I was the lead producer for the 2008 election coverage, which was like a dream of mine.
Okay.
Obama was my guy, and he wins the election. We interviewed him 2 days before the election.
Wow.
In Henderson, Nevada. And like, I don't know. My thing was always like, I got hit up by Vice a couple years earlier, and they wanted me to come there because they were starting their video channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to leave because I was still learning shit at MTV. I did live TV, live producing bigger things. You know, the election was like the biggest thing I did there.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized after the inauguration, I'd done everything I'd set out to do there. I came in as a writer 5 years earlier.
Got out of debt.
I actually got hired by MTV as a staff position, which they don't really do very often. But I accelerated through the ranks pretty quickly there. Mainly because I was older, right? I was like about 3 to 5 years older than everybody else. So like, you know, it was sort of like I had a pretty, I was mature enough to appreciate the opportunity, I think, right?
I got you.
And so I realized after the inauguration, I wasn't going to learn anything more there. And I didn't want to be a lifer because I'd seen the lifers and I didn't want to be a lifer.
Yeah.
So I took a job at Vice and I actually didn't do music at all at Vice. They wanted me to bring them to television. And so I spent the next 3 years traveling around the world doing Vice things.
Wow.
You know, shooting in favelas in Brazil and asking the local warlord for permission.
Yeah. So tell me one crazy Vice story.
We went to Yemen in 2010. Me, Shane Smith, Spike Jones, and our camera guy, Matt. And this is when America's fighting the war on terror. The Yemeni government is basically hustling the U.S. for money, saying there's Al-Qaeda in Yemen, so give us money to fight them.
Yeah.
And there isn't. And they're having their own problems with this group called the Houthis, the Houthi rebels. And it's a sort of corrupt government. And so, you know, anybody who speaks out against the government, they murder, right? And so we went to Yemen to do a story about how basically the war on terror was a farce. And we interviewed these people who basically had spoken out or speaking out against the government because the government was like disappearing doctors and stuff. And it was, you know, we said, we'll blur your faces out when we put this on TV. Because if the government sees your face, you're gonna die. We also decided to do a story on some skate kids because there was like skate culture happening in Yemen. Like these teenagers, rich kids, like they bought skateboards and all the old people in Sana'a, the capital, thought the kids doing skateboard tricks was like magic, like mystical shit, like spirits and shit.
Wow.
And so it was a really cool story. We were going to go to the north of Yemen to interview some soldiers. And then our fixer on the ground said, don't do that. And we're like, why? He's like, because I think there's going to be a battle there tomorrow on the way. You won't be safe. And I was like, okay, that's never stopped us before. But he was like me. And I had Spike Jones in my crew. And I'm not trying to get him killed, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we entered the country as students. We didn't say we were journalists, because if you say you're a journalist, they're going to put a government person on you. We said we were film students. So we decided not to go up north. We went to this island named Socotra instead. Socotra is an island off the coast of Yemen, which has the most indigenous plant and animal life, second to the Galapagos. Beautiful island. And it's World Cup season, so like we land in Socotra. There's one town on the island, and we're watching the World Cup in this square with everybody else. It's being projected off the internet. It was incredible. We spent 2 days in Socotra, gorgeous, goofing around, swimming in the ocean, talking to locals, and we then fly back to the mainland. On the way back in, we get detained by national security. They know we're not students. They know we're journalists. They know that someone ratted us out, basically.
You're about to say somebody was watching.
I think it was one of the kids, the skate kids. I think he went home bragging about being interviewed by this TV channel, and his father is like in the security apparatus. And so they basically detained us coming into the country. Never been so scared in my life. They detained not only us, but they took our footage. And we were like, shit. So I actually get released first and it's scary, like in a different country when you're like being detained by national security and you get caught lying. Yeah. I get released first because of my complexion and because I'm dressed in the local clothing, which is the first thing you do in any country that we were visiting. They thought I was a local. So they let me go. So then we had a whole contingency plan in place. I ended up calling our emergency contact, who I think was a CIA agent, even though he never admitted it. He was a friend of Tom Freston's. And Tom said, if you ever get in trouble, call this guy. So we're in trouble. I call this guy. He grabs me. He brings some cash. 4 hours later, he gets Matt, Shane, and Spike released. And he says, you have to leave the country right away. So we said, well, we can't. We have this footage that they have, and it's going to get those people killed. So he says, come back tomorrow morning. So we go back the next morning. He hands another wad of cash to somebody. We get the camera back. We get the tapes back. We download the tapes onto a drive. We erase the tapes that were there. We put everything back so no one's the wiser. And then we get escorted to the airport to get on a plane to leave the country. And we're hiding in a utility closet at the airport. This guy arranged everything. We're like with the workers in the utility closet and waiting until the plane is ready to take off. And they escort us to the tarmac, up into the plane, into the seats. Like everyone's paid off along the way. And then we leave the country. And it was like, yeah, I was like, oh, I'm going to die here. So
wow,
that was the craziest thing they ever had with me, advice.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Jeez, thank God you made it. Hey, so let's fast forward to you doing these award-winning documentaries. So the first one the first one is Summer of Soul. Is that the first one?
Yeah, it's the Summer of Soul. Started working on in 2019.
Yep.
2018 really, but really we got started in 2019.
Okay.
I was previously at Vivo as head of content over there. Hated it. Was looking to get back into TV and film. Hit up my old MTV boss, this guy Dave Sorolnik. Said, I'm itching to get back into TV and film. I'll do anything. Like I'll do any work you have. He's like, well, we have this idea. We need to do like a deck, a treatment. He's like, you know, it was a lot of work, but for not a lot of money. But I said, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So I took this half-page pitch and wrote a 30-page treatment and blew their minds away. I hired my own researcher. Like I just like really thugged it out. And my strategy was, if I blow their minds, I'll get another opportunity. They loved it. And the next thing I know, Dave calls me in the office. He's like, hey, do you know who Questlove is? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, we just hired him to direct his first documentary feature film. He needs a producer who basically can help him put this together. Mm-hmm. Would you be interested? And that's how Summer of Soul came.
Which is what, so I lived in Harlem for at least 30 years. No, pretty much. And I had never heard of this.
Yeah.
I had never heard it. As a matter of fact, one of the guys in the doc became a good friend of mine, Musa Jack.
Yeah.
But I got, I just had I didn't know anything about it. It was just it's a fascinating story. And the footage is incredible because, it's Mount Morris Park. It's like, it's still there. It's like, oh shit. Like that happened like right there. It was incredible, man.
Yeah. You know what was funny is when we were making that film, we had to find people who went.
Yeah.
And the first thing we did was, we had Facebook and Twitter and everything. Well, we didn't get anything back. And we realized, oh, you know what? Like, this is a generation of Harlem that's not on the socials, right? Mm-hmm. So we printed up a flyer that said, do you have a relative who talked about seeing Nina Simone in the park and you never believed her, right? Like, so, your uncle swears he saw Stevie in the park for free.
Yeah.
We dropped that off at social clubs, at churches, at record stores, community centers, and we started getting responses back.
Wow.
And that's how we found people. Ashley Bembry Kentuck was our associate producer. She went, some folks at like a ballroom dancing class, like we put in like boots on the ground work.
Yeah.
To find people who went to that festival. Finding Musa was the most incredible story in the world because, Ashley's like, oh, I found this guy Musa. Everyone says, that he's the mayor of Harlem, right? And he knows everybody. And we're like, cool. They said he says he was at the festival as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. I'm like, okay, well, what could he remember? And
everything.
She did the pre-interview with him, and he, again, no one's seen the footage. The footage had not been broadcast. Some of it had been broadcast the week it happened, or the week after. One weekend got broadcast, but like the rest of it never got broadcast since. We had gotten these new photos from the New York Times that had never been published that showed vendors around the park. And Musa, in his pre-interview, talked about, he knew exactly. The Fifth Dimension was the group that he remembered. Mm-hmm. He remembers going with his mother's boyfriend. He remembers balloons being given out to kids in the park, which we have on camera. He remembers what they were wearing. He says they were wearing orange like the creamsicles, and that's exactly what they're wearing.
Yep.
He talked about vendors around the park and chicken in the foil.
Mm-hmm.
And he just started naming detail after detail. And I was like, there is no way he would know this unless it's legitimately what he remembers.
Yeah.
So we do the whole interview with him, and then we show him the footage.
He started crying.
And that's what bookends the film, right? Is him seeing it and then responding to it with tears. Because he realized this memory he's been holding for 50 years.
Yeah, and so many people probably never, he said, didn't believe him. Whatever, man. And he's like, no, bro, I'm telling you, it happened. So, like, I'm going to ask him maybe I don't know if it's a silly question, but I've never met anybody else win an Oscar but you. How does it feel to win an Oscar, bro?
Yeah, man. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that was going to happen. We never aimed for it. We never thought it was possible. We never talked about it. And then, we just want to make a movie that we loved and that we thought our friends would love and our parents would love. And we did. And then we bring it to Sundance. I remember getting the call. It's going to Sundance. I'm like, oh my God, it's the greatest day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
A movie I made is going to Sundance Film Festival. Then it's virtual that year. Then we screen it. People love it. Then we win Sundance. Not only the audience award, but the grand jury prize. I'm like, this is the best it'll ever get. And then 3 days later, there's a bidding war between Barack Obama's production company and Netflix on one side, and Hulu and Searchlight on the other. I'm like,
what the hell is going on?
And then we partner with Hulu and Disney and Onyx Collective and Searchlight. They're like, we're going to put it out in theaters. It's going to be on Hulu. I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the world. This is the greatest feeling in the world.
Yeah.
Movie comes out. People love it. I'm waiting for the bad reviews. There's no bad reviews. Like people, it's still got like a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes or something.
Amazing. It's amazing. There's no flaws. 5 mics would say.
No, I mean, it's crazy. I realize, and I say this with all humility, like because it came from a genuine place, I think it's one of the best music documentaries ever made, right?
I agree with you.
Because I think it's a story it hits on so many different levels. And it's a story about Black history and how Black history is American history. It's also a story about memory and the things that we remember and the things that we cherish and like who gets to determine what's remembered and what's not, right? It hits on different levels. And none of it was accidental. All of it was very intentional. It just kept getting better. To get nominated for an Oscar, I cried. My mom was up at like 5 a.m. her time and like watching, and it just validated so many, my parents who didn't want me to do what I was doing, I didn't understand it, suddenly are very proud, right? That came full circle. Really getting to experience the whole thing with Amir was incredible because like, working with your musical hero is like, And then the Oscars themselves, and then what happened at the Oscars is insane, right? You were
there the Will Smith slap.
That was our category. That was Chris Rock presenting us the Oscar, and then
crazy,
And then the next day, I hear Chris Rock say something disparaging, where he's like, the winner is Summer of Soul, Amir, Questlove, Thompson, and 4 white guys, right? Which is like just such a shitty thing to say when like only a dozen people had ever won Oscars, South Asian people had ever won Oscars before. And he knew better. Like he knew better. Yeah. He said the same joke on stage at the Roots show 2 nights earlier. I in hindsight, I cut him a little slack now because he probably was traumatized in the moment and didn't know what to do. But also fuck him.
Yeah.
But the Oscar professionally changes your life, but real talk, it's great that it's happened. I feel like I don't have to explain myself now when I want a meeting or in the room somewhere.
Yeah.
The powers that be, like I can get any meeting that I need to. Mm-hmm. That's a really great card to have. But honestly, the thing that makes me proudest is that we made a great movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like really, it's nice to have the Oscar. It's nice to be in the history books. It's nice to never have to explain my ability to somebody ever again. Mm-hmm. It frees me up to do the other things that I want to do.
Where's your trophy?
Right now, it's downstairs on a
Okay.
shelf, on where my record player is. Like,
I should have told you to bring it on the
yeah,
show.
no, I mean, it used to be in the Zoom shot because I wanted to make sure no one ever got it twisted in a pitch meeting. But I moved recently, so I'm still a little
unpacking
disorganized.
shit.
Yeah, but
so tell me how you got from that accolade to doing the Sly Stone doc.
Yeah, so Sly actually
also amazing.
Thank you. Sly got announced after Sundance, so before the Summer of Soul even came out. I read in Hollywood Reporter that Amir has signed up to direct a Sly and the Family Stone documentary, and I call him up. I'm like, "Yo, congrats! Do you want me to work on this with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I need to be a part of the conversation next time.
Yeah,
I am not a hired hand. Like I'm part of the announcement now."
Exactly.
And I didn't know what I was going to do after Summer of Soul. I didn't know how this business worked. So I didn't know Summer of Soul was going to be that successful. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to do this. It took a while to get that project started because we had to sort of like, I didn't work for like a year because what no one tells you is if your movie comes out and it starts to do the award circuit, you are expected to promote it. You don't get paid to do that. I'm doing slide promotion now and it's taking away from the thing I'm actually getting paid to do.
Yeah.
So I spent a whole year before we even started Sly after it got announced. But that was really because Amir wanted to do it. And I didn't know a lot about Sly. I just knew the music really through hip hop and what I heard on the radio, but I didn't know the story. And so, I spent the first few months really just trying to get some fluency about his story together. And then the way Amir and I work is I ask him, we have a conversation. What kind of story do you want to tell? And he kept talking about not only, Sly, everyone knows the ups and downs of Sly's story, but like, he's like, how do we approach it with some empathy? Yeah. And then it's really the bigger idea is that, a lot of Black artists in America have a unique burden. And he's like, if you trace it back, Sly is probably the first artist to have this specific unique burden. Post-civil rights rock superstar who has to navigate Black audiences, white critics, the record label power structure. And he's like, he has no template. He has no one to follow.
Yeah.
He's doing it for the first time. How some of those same issues that he dealt with had reverberated in the decade since.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting angle that you guys took, like the kind of Black genius thing with him and D'Angelo and Andre 3000 and like people who get even Q-Tip, people kind of get to that level, and Prince, maybe we can go on and on. Michael, yeah. we could mention 40 of them, and like you get to that height, and like how do you do it? Because it gets crazy, and like you're so removed from who you were because you're so high up the ladder now. It's kind of like he wasn't the guy from the radio DJ from San Francisco, was like way in the fucking rearview mirror. So like, how do you? Yeah, no, it was a very, and I was happy that you guys had tapes of him being a radio DJ because I still don't know how many people knew about that part of it and how influential he was when he was doing that.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you think about it, he's on the radio playing black and white music together. And in a way, he's sort of like seeding his audience that he would play to for his band a few years later. When Sly and Family Stone comes out, there's a whole bunch of people who are primed to hear that kind of mix of styles because they listen to him on the radio. And, I think Amir, we got D'Angelo and Q-Tip and Shaka and Andre as proxies for Sly.
Yes.
Because we couldn't talk to Sly. He's alive, but just not in a place where you should put him on camera.
Not healthy. Yeah.
And we wanted him to have his dignity, right? We didn't want to like hang him out there like that.
Yeah.
That's what the whole movie's about. It's like, this man has given us so much. Let's just let him live in peace. Right.
Yeah.
But, D'Angelo, Amir was a witness to D'Angelo facing the pressure on the Voodoo Tour every night, having to be in perfect physical condition every night so we could take his shirt off and do How Does It Feel to a room full of screaming fans. And how it got harder and harder for him to do that. Andre, everyone wants him to rap. He saw what this did to other people. And he says, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm off the radar. Don't think about me.
Yep.
I'm gonna go play a flute
in Japan. You just walk around
You know
on
what
the
I mean?
street in Tokyo. Yeah,
Q-Tip has this line in the film where he's like, when you're black and you're innovative, they may look at you like you're odd.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine, like, you know how many people call Q-Tip gay back in the
Yeah.
day, right?
Yeah, I do.
Or if you're just a little different, they're like, oh, he's gay. And that was like
Yeah.
20 years ago, 30 years ago when the homophobia was at an all-time high.
Mhm.
Now it's just like, oh, this dude's weird. He's
Yeah.
or you're alt rap.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I think that black artists have had to deal with in this country that other artists haven't had to. I think women have their own unique issues that
I
they've
was
had
able to say, even with Nina Simone, like now you look back at a lot of the things that she was fighting for and talking about, it makes fucking perfect
sense. Yeah.
She wasn't crazy. She knew these guys were trying to jerk her, and she wanted to be respected and paid for her work. Like, she wasn't a nut at all.
And who's the other one for our generation is Lauren, right?
Yep.
Lauren didn't participate in the film, but when we were making the film, she had that viral clip of her in LA where she's like, do you know how hard it is for me to get prepared mentally to come on stage every night and perform for you?
Mm-hmm.
And people took it out of context, but her whole rant is actually the theme of our film.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you think, like, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And then also post Oscars, Amir was like feeling guilty about being successful. That whole idea that success, like, be careful what you wish for.
Survivor's remorse kind of thing.
Yeah, because
made it.
Here he is. He gets an Oscar right out the gate, his first documentary. And he's like, is my band going to treat me the same? I feel bad that Tariq wasn't a part of this. This guy I've been with on my journey for 30 years. Like, are people going to be like, oh, that's just Amir being Amir? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's he ducked away after the Oscars for a few months because I couldn't get a hold of him because he was just trying to like reset and like deal with it. Yeah. So I think what makes the thing that connects both films is that I think what Amir and I are really good at is how do you tell a very specific story that actually resonates to a bigger idea?
Yeah.
And I think both these films are that.
So tell us, let's wrap it up and tell me about the next project you're working on. I know about, but you break it down.
Yeah, so we I'm not working with Amir on Earth, Wind and Fire. I didn't work with him on SNL. But we're doing a Jay Dilla documentary. We've been trying to put it together for 3 years. I am directing that one. Amir is executive producing that one.
Okay.
It's based on Dilla Time by Dan Charnas, our friend.
Yes.
Very thoroughly researched book.
Very.
We just started about 2 weeks ago. Hope to be done by this time next year, which will be the 20th anniversary of Dilla's death.
Wow. It's been 20 years. Wow.
And really it's about how, and it's a passion project, but it's like how, it's about Dilla and what he did to music and also why we celebrate him.
Yeah.
More in death than in life. And also it's about time. It's about the way Dilla manipulated time, but also about the way artists or the way people live their life when they think they have all the time in the world, and then what they do when they realize they don't have any time at all.
Yeah, no, the clock is, the sand is running out.
I mean, for me, COVID was that, right? I think during COVID, I realized, there's not a lot of time left. Like, you will not catch me doing anything I don't want to do anymore because time is valuable.
Yeah.
So being here with you is because I wanted to be here with you.
I appreciate it. I wanted you on here. I mean, look at us. We got gray hair now. You
I
know.
know.
But we're still rocking, Man, I really appreciate this. This is a great interview, bro. And
yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate you asking.
I feel like we could talk for 5 hours, honestly. I know we could.
I will say this. I never thought I'd be in a position where people would want to hear my story. And I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of people who learn lessons from it. I spend a lot of my time post Oscars, honestly, mentoring younger kids, not even younger, like even like some people my age too. Mm-hmm. I'm part of Sophia Chang's mentorship program. I'm part of Joey Badass's mentorship program. I meet young South Asian filmmakers or creatives, and they ask for time. I'll give them time because I just feel like I got blessed. It's a result of a lot of hard work, but if I can make that path a little easier for other people because no one taught me about the industry. I had to find out on my own. If I can make that path easier for somebody else, so there's more time creating and less time trying to figure the bullshit out. Mm-hmm. That's my purpose on the planet while I'm still here.
And that's what sparked me doing this podcast.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
People that I know and respect that have had, success, but maybe even had to pivot, and kind of go here to figure out the next steps and everything. And hopefully people listening will hear these stories and be like, oh, okay. And that's the guy who did the slide doc, that's the whole point of this. So
I can't wait till it flips around and someone gets to interview you, because I know you got stories.
Yeah, I got some stories.
And actually, one story you told me has never left me. I remember you told me the story of when you signed the pack, and you were like, I'm the guy that signed Tribe Called Quest, and they're like, who?
Who the hell are you talking about?
And I will always remember that story, because it was one of the things that taught me that something Dream Hampton taught me a long time ago. Hip hop is whatever little black and brown kids say it is.
Yes.
They are not tied to your history. They are making their own.
You can't fight it. You can't be like, yo, hot. Like, I remember, we'll wrap it up. I remember a couple months ago, people were on Kai Cenat because he didn't know who Big Pun was.
Right.
I'm like, he's 22.
Yeah, you can't be mad at that dude.
He's been dead about that long, sadly. Like, he might not know. He's a kid. He's a child. Yeah. And what hip hop is for him is, Drake and Playboy Cardi and whatever's popping now. And
it's not Biggie.
It's not Biggie, man.
Yeah.
No. And I can't be mad at him for it not being that for him and his generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, Joe.
Listen, man. Thank you.
You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.